Hi again, it's Miguel with another video in the series of 10 common Wall Street misconceptions. The one that we're going to cover tonight is money is not your biggest asset. So, when we hear a lot about investment, we hear about people who have millions and billions of dollars and how they're trading an ungodly amount of money, but you really have to wonder, how exactly did they build that? Well, let's start with the most basic component of how money is created. That's the interest formula. And according to the interest formula, the way that you calculate the compounding of interest throughout time is through three factors: rate times principal times time. Now, a lot of people think that you have to start with a lot of money in order to end up with a lot of money, but when you really look at the inner workings of the equation, you can recognize that it's really not as important to have a high principal as it is to have a lot of time when you invest. According to Albert Einstein, he said that the principle of compound interest is the most powerful force that is known to man. And he's the dude who helped work on the inner workings of mathematics of the atomic bomb. Like, he would definitely know a thing or two about the world's or the universe's most powerful forces. So I'm definitely going to take his word at the fact that the compound interest formula is probably something that's important to know and to understand how each component of it fits into the grand unified theory of everything. So when we look at some of the more common investment vehicles, let's say mutual funds, right? A lot of them have really high starting requirements. They might say that you have to start off with $2,500, $5,000. It can go as high as $10,000 to $25,000. That really is a disincentive for people to throw their money into the stock market because they don't have all that money to start off with. But there are a plethora of different places that you can start. You can set up an E-Trade account, Scottrade account, Schwab account. There are plenty of different places where you can start off with a low requirement. Personally, I'm a fan of motif investing that actually allows you to start with as little as $250, and you can actually select what's called a motif, or it basically tracks an exchange traded fund, or what's called an ETF. And an ETF is basically an investment vehicle that attempts to track a certain exchange or certain sector, certain industries. An example might be an ETF that tracks biotechnology. Well, the cool thing about Motif is that it actually allows for you to see all of the different ETFs, or what they call on the website motifs, which is sort of like their own little branding, and figure out what other people are building. They might create like a 3D printing motif, or maybe a British decline motif, whatever it is that they think is going to make them money. So if you have an idea of a certain strategy, but you really don't know what individual stocks that should go inside of it, I think that motif investing is really a good place to start to kind of get your feet wet in choosing stocks and actually putting your money to work. And I also like the fact that they have a lower starting requirement, so I think that that's pretty cool too. But I'll go more into the inner workings of what actually it takes to start an investing account in later videos. But I just wanted to talk about how you can really start investing with a small amount of money. So even though, according to the Wall Street Journal on 2014, they claimed that the top 10% of all income earners owned about 93% of all stocks. Well, they had to get there somehow, right? That if they own all of these stocks, how did they end up in the top 10%? Well, the answer is because they invested in stocks. They invested in the specific investment vehicle that would gain them a high, and not just a high, but like the highest of possible returns that they could get. So even though the S&P 500 tracks about a 10% return rate in any given year, For the sake of the scenario, I broke it down into two components. I broke it down as an 8% annual return rate for market appreciation, which is basically a jargony term for share prices going up or down. That when the stock price increases because everybody wants to buy it, it causes stocks to increase. Whereas market depreciation, or the stock market or individual stocks going down, is when everybody's trying to sell and they have to lower the price to make sure that they can actually find a buyer who's willing to buy it at a lower price. That's sort of like the inner workings of supply and demand. But for this first scenario, I wanted to start off with a case study where somebody would start off investing at 20 years old. So I used a DRIP calculator, which is also called a dividend reinvestment plan calculator, and it's included in the section below and right above the comments. So if you want to type in your own little scenario of how much you want to start with, of how much you plan to contribute each month, and figure out exactly what it'll take for you to achieve your investment goals, I made sure that I included that for you so that you could have access to that information. But for the sake of explanation and for teaching, I came up with two scenarios. The first of a 20-year-old and the second of a 40-year-old. So let's start with the 20-year-old. For the sake of this example, we're going to say that this person's expecting to retire at 66. I know that 65 is sort of like this arbitrary number that a lot of people shoot for, but life expectancy has been increasing over time. It's about 75 right now. So I figured that for the sake of the example, that you would plan to retire and give yourself a good decade of reasonable life expectancy. For this example, you start off with $1,000 a month. Say that you made money from a graduation, or let's say you had a really pop-in bar bat mitzvah and you got a bunch of $18 checks, or maybe you've been accumulating that money from birthdays, whatever it is. You start off with an $1,000 nest egg, and you decide to contribute $100 a month. Well, if you were to do that every single year until you retired at 66, with an 8% annual return rate and 2% in dividends, just because over time, if you did invest in an index like the S&P 500, some of those returns would be from share prices going up or down, and some of that money would be in dividends, which is actual literal checks that companies send you that's a share of their profit. If McDonald's makes money in the first quarter and they decide that they're going to pay out 20% of their profits, that literal check money gets sent to you, and I'll be sure to focus more on dividends in later videos. But for the sake of this example, 8% annual return rate for market appreciation and 2% for your dividend yield. You would end up with over $1 million. In fact, the number would be $1,030,333.92 as your lump sum, and then your dividend payments would be $18,711.53. Now let's look at the 40-year-old scenario. So with the 40-year-old scenario, again, we're going to say that you're going to retire at 66, use that for 10 years till you're 75, but we'll say that when you're 40, you start off with $50,000. You start off with 50 times the amount of money than you start off when you're 20. And you decide that you're going to contribute twice as much. You're going to contribute $200 a month. Well, clearly, since you're starting off with 50 times more money, and you're contributing 2 times $200, not just $100 each month, then you're clearly going to end up with more money to end with, right? Absolutely not. The total sum that you would achieve in the lump sum would be $857,945.06, and your dividend checks would only be $15,555.36. So while there's a common misconception among millennials particularly that, oh, I'm not going to invest until I'm out of college, like I'm going to wait until I settle down and have a family. No, you're literally leaving your biggest asset, which is time, directly on the table. That if you wait 20 years from when you're 20 to when you're 40, even if you start off with 50 times more money and you're contributing 2 times more each month, you're still going to end up with less than if you had given that time for your money to compound over time. So that's what this lesson wanted to focus on, demonstrating that the most important thing you can possibly do for your investment goals is to start off investing early. So now that we've dispelled this fiction that money is your biggest asset, hopefully you can start investing now and start taking reasonable tips to save a little bit of money each month, just because if you're not investing when you're young, you're leaving your biggest possible asset on the table. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out my previous video and my future videos to come. Thank you so much.